Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. Today, I get to interview Rachel Polk, who is a physical therapist and runner, among other things, of course. But today, we really talk about things from a physical therapy standpoint. She also talks about her running journey, some really cool races that she's done, the lessons that she's learned, but we also get into helping kids have balance in sport. We talk about running form. We talk about ways to, really understand how kids are running, why they're running the way that they're running, and ways to help them improve those things. So super informative. We do have a couple moments where the audio gets a little glitchy, but it really doesn't stay too long. So hang in there. It is definitely worth a listen. So without further ado, let's get to it. At some point I can get like things that are also going to be interesting and on like a kid kind of level too. But I was like, I don't really know where I'm at yet with all of that. So
right.
But yeah, so that's kind of what I have going on. So I just wanted to start with you, if you wanted to share about your running journey, kind of when you started, why you started, and like what you have going on now with running.
Sure. So I've actually been a runner for going on 16 years now. I've been a runner as long as I've been a PT and a physical therapist. And I actually started running after I got out of grad school as just a way of like getting fit and healthy, because I did a lot of studying and not a lot of exercising. I had my first baby when I was in college, so I had her my sophomore year. So it was a lot of juggling school and being a mom. And then once I graduated, I had a little more time, believe it or not, when I was working. So I took up running. And at that point, I could barely make it around my block without stopping. So it was, I started from very humble beginnings, and I basically, over the years, worked myself up to marathon distance. I've done some ultra marathons, I've done ironman, triathlon. So I've done some, half ironmans, and like every other distance in between. So I've been road running, I've done trail running, and so more recently, in the last 4 years or so, I started my own business to work with moms who want to run through pregnancy and get back to it postpartum. I'm currently pregnant with my fourth baby right now. So my kids are 20, almost 4, 1.5, and then I'm due at the end of July. So I've had my own sort of struggles with running through pregnancy and then like getting back to it postpartum, which is sort of why I got into the women's health arena. But, my daughter she never really wanted to run just for the sake of running, my oldest, probably because mom did it. But she did do, some others, but she was on the swim team. She did track and field. So there was definitely some cross training and running involved with that as well. So this is, I'd love to speak to, training with kids and not overtraining, because I've seen that with her own coaches as well. So between my experience with PT, my own experience as a runner, and then as a mom, I hope that I can offer your listeners some advice.
Yeah, no, and it's a great segue, because I was like, I never know where to go once people start talking about their running journey. I'm like, you can start asking them about their, favorite races or experiences with that, or lessons they've learned, or things from the past. And I feel like you just said like all the things I wanted to get to. So I guess we can start with talking about, you from any perspective you want to start with, but like the overtraining in kids, because I think that's something we don't talk about enough. And we often talk about like kids being overscheduled or doing too much. But I don't think we're always talking about how, what level of fitness the kids should have and what kind of practices and trainings like that should look like. So from any perspective you want to talk about, either as a mom or past experience or anything, or as a PT, really where we should be at with training and kids.
Yeah. So, first and foremost, like as a mom, when my daughter was on, I know this is not running, but when she was on the swim team, there were hours long practices 5 days a week, sometimes on the weekends with a meet. And they were doing, sometimes the day before a meet, like doing sprint practices. And I was always like, that is like coming from a running perspective, like when you're getting ready for an event or a race, like you want to be tapering down, not like ramping up with intensity, either in time or effort, or anything like that. So, my own experience just from doing races, especially like the longer distances, like tapers for like, a marathon are usually like 2 weeks long. Like if you're doing just like if you're doing a 5K, or a 10K, your taper should be like in the 3 days minimum, up to a week, depending on sort of what your goals are and what your fitness level is, but absolutely like not running much or at all the day before an event, and definitely not pushing working on your speed or anything like that right before an event. And then also to keep in mind, like training wise, is to balance easy efforts and hard efforts, right? So like our fitness and our performance comes from actually the relative rest, or the actual rest phase of our training. So either an off day or an active recovery day where you're just doing stretching or like an easy run, like more of your runs should be easy than hard, because if you do too many hard runs, your body can't recover from that, and then that can lead to overtraining. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that when you're training for something, you're trying to get faster, you're trying to do more miles, that should really only be a small percentage of like your weekly training load. And sometimes the temptation is there, especially with kids, to the ability to sort of self-regulate, like, is this easy or is this hard? It can be kind of challenging. So that's where we come in as parents and coaches, to try to kind of slow them down, or, not necessarily slow them down, but like make it very different, like the types of practices, where you're trying to go for speed and you're hyping them up, or it's just like, okay, just like leisurely type of jog here. So having that balance is really important, and to not do too much hard stuff all at once. And, I see patients all the time, and not even necessarily, yes, I still work outpatient orthopedics full time during the day, in addition to the business that I run. So like I'm seeing somebody who, recently is coming back from an injury. She broke her ankle months ago. She wants to get back to running. And so we're starting to work on some pre-running stuff. And she's like, yeah, when I do like the jumping stuff every day. And I'm like, no. You don't do, like, we're not doing the hard stuff every day. It has to be every other day or every third day. And when you're just beginning, to ramp up intensity, speed, distance, things like that, you want to like one hard effort a week. Like that's it, right? If you're just kind of starting out, it's just one hard effort a week, and then reassess, like after a few weeks, like, does that feel good in your body? Are you able to recover? Do you have any soreness? Because if you do too many hard efforts over a week or over a time span, and it is eventually going to catch up with you in the form of fatigue, either physical fatigue or mental fatigue, exhaustion, being really grumpy all the time, like just not having a good attitude. Like if you find that you're snapping or you can't focus, like those are signs of overtraining, in addition to having like physical complaints. So like, injuries, or, not necessarily like a full blown injury, but, running related, like, oh, my knee feels a little like off, or, my foot or my ankle, I can feel a little something. It doesn't really feel like a full blown thing, but that can be a sign of overtraining too. And sometimes it doesn't catch up for, 3, 4, 5, or 6 weeks. And by then it's often too late. So it's definitely better to like err on the conservative side, which is what I a lot of times preach to my patients and clients isn't it better to kind of move slowly and gradually and take that extra however long it is to get to whatever the goal is we're trying to achieve, rather than trying to rush towards that goal and then have a setback, and then you might not be able to get to that goal in that same amount of time. It might take you twice as long or 3 times as long, depending on sort of what those consequences are of, not maintaining sort of that balance in your training. So I guess my whole point is like keep balance in your training, not too many hard efforts, and just be mindful of like those signs of overtraining. So parents can sort of keep an eye out for that. Like, is there a change in your child's, sleep pattern? Are they not able to sleep really well? Are they restless at night? Are they waking up a lot at night? Are they sleeping, less hours? Because I know when I was in the height of my training, I think, like the most I run is like 70 miles in a week, but like when you're running a lot, your body sort of has like the reverse response where like it can't ramp down. You're so amped up from the training that you can't ramp down. So if your child's having sleeping, like I said, or waking a lot at night, or waking up and not feeling rested at all, if you notice that they're more snappy or grumpy, I mean, the age ranges, depends on the age. So like, if we're talking like our 11 to 13-year-olds, I mean, it might be sort of hormonal stuff too going on. So you kind of have to suss that out a little bit. But if you're noticing, any sort of those like behaviors, or like they start complaining, like, my knee hurts, or, you ask them to do something that they normally like to do, and now all of a sudden they don't want to do it, that's another sign too. So just kind of be on the alert. Sometimes the signs of overtraining are not overt, like all of a sudden they're limping, or, they're complaining that something hurts, but it can be something more subtle, where you're recognizing it in their behaviors, or their sleep patterns, even sometimes appetite too. Like I can remember myself too, like doing a lot of training, and just like you need to eat to fuel, but sometimes the body just, it's like I had no appetite, and it was crazy because I would go out and train, come home, and just like not have an appetite for anything. So that's another sign as well.
Are there common injuries, and I know that like everyone's different, but common injuries that you would see in kids to look out for? I'm just trying to think back to when I was younger. I mean, I don't ever remember having like a sports injury besides like you fall and break your arm and that kind of thing. But I do remember having complaints of growing pains or whatever they were, like my knees hurt, my shins hurt, my feet hurt. And it was always just like, oh, that's growing pains, you're growing. But are there things that, would be a common one that you would see in kids that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so in my like pediatric or young adult population, a lot of times what I see when they play sports is, again, going back to that theme of balance, is that they're just doing their sport and they're not doing anything else. So that's where they get in trouble, because they don't have adequate strength to support the sport that they're doing, or they don't have adequate flexibility to support the sport that they're doing. So in the case of running, having like a good stretch routine a couple times a week is really important, but also like strengthening is really important too. So if you think about running from like a biomechanical standpoint, so just looking at the body, it's a forward motion, right? So there's no lateral side to side motion. So for runners, a lot of times the injury is the knees, right? So the knees or the IT bands, and I do see a lot of knee injuries in kids because I strength test them and I'm like, how are you even like participating in your sport? Because like your strength to be honest, it's not good. And so I have to get them to do some exercise for strengthening. And a lot of times for kids, that is not fun. It's boring, but it's also necessary. So as a parent and as a coach, like incorporating, I'm not really sure like what your practices look like, but incorporating drills where you're doing, side to side motions, in addition to forwards and backwards motions, so that you're using all of those, all of your stabilizing muscles. It's the lateral muscles, those side to side muscles that actually give us our stability when we're running forward. And if those muscles aren't strong enough, a lot of times what happens is it shows up in the knee. So runner's knee is a very common injury for a lot of runners, but also sort of in the younger population as well. So yeah, incorporating, regular stretching, regular strengthening, or, addressing those lateral motions, those will help sort of fend off injuries, so that you maintain that balance. As you can see, I really am a lot about preventative measures. So making sure that, you're doing things in a way that's going to be safe for the body, so that we're not getting to the point of injury. We're not getting to the point of overtraining, but let's do the things ahead of time to prevent those things from happening, because the last thing the kid wants to do is stop doing the thing that they love to do. And in this case, if it's running, right, to tell them, sorry, you can't do this practice, or you can't do this run because XYZ. I mean, that's devastating for them. So it's really important to try to incorporate in as fun a way as possible, those preventative measures, because then they come see me for PT, and it's not quite as fun in the beginning to do their therapy exercises. I try to make it fun, but once they get to that point where they're not able to do their sport, we really just need to go back to basics. So as much as you can incorporate preventive measures, drills, etc., to help prevent those injuries from happening is really, really key.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I always am trying to have them with every practice. We do like a pretty dynamic warm up. We do some strengthening exercises for cool down. And of course, no one likes that because it's not very fun. And then we'll have like a strength training circuit that we do like throughout, closer to the end of our season, just to make sure that they're aware of ways to move their body and strengthen things. In addition to the stretching, the strengthening, do playing other sports, like, would that be considered the balance that you're talking about? Because we have a lot of kids, because practice is usually either 1 day a week or 2 days a week, just because everyone is so busy, that they often play another sport at the same time. So is that a similar kind of balance, or would that probably not necessarily be what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that would be cross training, right? So cross training is great for running, for injury prevention. I think the thing with kids that we need to keep in mind is not overscheduling them. So just because, the running activity is only, 1 to 2 days a week, that doesn't mean we need to fill, the other 5 days out of the week with another activity. In reality, everyone, should have 1 to 2 days of complete rest, like no activity at all. Another day should be like a very like an active rest day where, maybe you go for a walk with the family, or you go for a hike or something like that. But the kids I see who do sports, and my daughter included when she was on the swim team, 5 to 7 days a week, those are the ones who end up with injury. So cross training is good, but again, find the balance of like how many days out of the week, how many hours out of the week, right? I mean, like I've seen some kids who, I go to dance class. It's like 4 hours every single day for 6 days out of the week. Or, they play a sport, and the sport is, they love that sport so much that they play it year round, and then there's no break. So, I mean, just like with, as adults, when we train for an event, right, we have like seasons, we have like periodization of training where like, okay, I'm training for this event, so I have X number of weeks where like I'm doing more intense work. And then after my event or whatever goal it is that I'm working up to, I'm basically taking some time off, quote unquote off. So it's just going to be, easier training, more cross training, more strengthening. So there needs to be that balance of not doing everything all the time, all year round, but also like, what does the week look like? What does the month look like? Are you incorporating enough rest days and enough cross training? So I think that's good to do like a sport and running, because they can both bolster each other. So like if somebody plays soccer, for example, on a team, and then is also doing the run club, so soccer has a lot of cutting motions, so that's your side to side motions, or basketball has sort of those side to side motions, so that's going to help with the running. Doing the run club is going to help with cardiovascular endurance for the basketball and for the soccer. So I think those are great complements, but again, how many days out of the week are we having our kids participate in activities? They don't need to be doing something every single day out of the week. And in fact, they shouldn't be doing something every single day out of the week. There needs to be some some built-in rest in there.
I recently just recorded just like a me talking kind of podcast, and I was talking about like sports specialization and burnout in sports for kids, and it you touched on all the topics that I had been seeing when I was researching on that of you need to have a balance, but they really need to have those rest days, and what can that look like? So now that feels really validating for me, because I was like, oh, this is what I was just talking about, and there's other people who are definitely backing up what I was saying. So no, that's great. And that's good. That's good advice for all of us, because I think we definitely see a lot of that overscheduling, and there's so many options for things for kids to do now, like, sports all year round, and, having 6 different things they're doing all throughout the week. So no, I think that's great. Sticking to the PT topic, I saw that you are talking a lot about gait analysis on, I saw that on Facebook, and it had me thinking, so for the kids, typically, we're just focusing on like ways that they don't want to be wasting energy when they're running. So, why our arms are moving forward and not side to side because of the momentum, and how, you don't want to be clenching your fists because now everything's tightening up and you want to run relaxed, and, it's not stomping your feet, because then it's you're putting more pressure on your joints, and it's just not an efficient way to run. So we talk about those kinds of things, but, I kind of just wanted to get your input on, cueing kids to run with good running form, but also, do you see like gait issues in children so much, or is it more as adults because we're overcompensating for things, or we learn something weird that, then we start doing things that aren't really making sense anymore?
Yeah, so with kids, I mean, depending on the age, developmentally, they'll develop more proper running form. So if we're talking about like our 3 and 4-year-olds, we don't necessarily want to be correcting their form, because there are some what we would call quote unquote abnormalities that are actually normal, right? So like kids who are younger normally have more hyperpronation in their feet, right? So their feet are a little bit flatter, their knees kind of point in towards each other, and that's sort of normal just with like foot development, the development of the strength in the arches of the feet, the development of their hips, and all of that sort of thing. Now, when you talk about, kids who are a little bit older, where, sort of that cueing becomes a little bit more important, where, they've been running for a longer part of their life, for play or that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, looking at gait form is really, as a PT, I can't go anywhere without looking at how somebody is walking and moving and making inferences about what's going on with, with their gait pattern, and how does that relate to strength and overall function. So in I would say probably in the kids who are older, sort of that becomes a little bit more important, especially if they're dealing with anything, where they're complaining about, my knee hurts, or my ankle feels funny, or my foot hurts, or any of those sort of like regular running complaints, or even hip pain too, because kids are still growing and developing at that age. So giving some cues is helpful, but also just sort of noticing, like, if you're cueing somebody, to have their arms more by their side, right? Like you mentioned, rather than crossing the body. Yes, that's more efficient. But, if they're not able to, after so many sessions or whatever, they're not able to internalize and apply that, you might want to think about, well, what's really going on in their body that they're not able to fix that? Because sometimes you can give the cue, but and sometimes it's just a matter of like noticing and fixing it, but sometimes there's an underlying issue, right? So like if somebody is crossing their arms over their body or holding their arms out to the side, that's a signal that, for example, their core strength isn't good, right? Or they're trying to gain stability in another way. They can't, run with their arms down by their side. So that might be a clue as to, something else that's going on. Like, does the kid have scoliosis that's undiagnosed, that maybe they are able to, if you're looking at the trunk, maybe they're able to rotate more one way than the other. So like, what's going on with the spine, So like, if they're not responding to cues, and that's why I said after a number of sessions, not because they're not listening, but because they really can't physically make those changes because there's something, underlying. And stomping the feet too. I mean, that's another thing where, as kids are learning to run developmentally, that's very normal, because like I said, like the arches of their feet are not fully formed, so they're not able to use sort of that spring of the arch in the foot to kind of spring off the foot, so they're landing more heavily. But as kids get older, right, they can do more of a heel to toe pattern, and you'll see different patterns develop too, right? Like, are they running more on their toe? Are they running more sort of midfoot? Or are they more of a heel striker? And you'll kind of see that develop as they get a little bit older. Did that answer your question, or did I just go off on like a total tangent?
No, that was great, and super helpful. And I mean, I know what I know about running, but you know, it's good for me to remember that, yes, like the little kids, right, their feet are flatter, right, so they are going to be stomping. It is going to be different. So no, I think that's a great reminder of, you know, we can tell them the correct way that they should be running, but expect that those things aren't going to necessarily look the same as they're growing up. So no, that was great. Thank you. I think I have time for like maybe 2 more questions. So because we talked about running form and, you know, running gait and all that stuff, I feel like I have to ask, have you read Born to Run, Chris McDougall's book about barefoot running?
I did read that one. Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts on running barefoot versus running in shoes and all that?
Yeah. So we could probably spend like 3 hours talking about this topic. It's really a point of personal preference, kind of how your body structure is, what your body can handle, and like a lot of other factors, like what your strength is like. If you've noticed, sort of in the running world, we've gone from like barefoot running, minimalist shoes, low drop, zero drop shoes, back to, we've swung sort of all the way the other way with Hoka came out, and it's like super cushion shoes, extra support, and like everything in between. So, and Hoka is kind of like scaled back, where they're trying to appeal to sort of more the I don't want to say regular, but just sort of like, you know, neutral runner, where they have shoes that don't have a ton of cushion now. But yeah, I mean, it's like the whole gamut, and then the pendulum swings, and it was a fad for a while for barefoot running. It was a fad for a while for like the built up shoe. I think it's really, and I've done a lot of research on this and some continuing education as well with running. And it's really like the whole thing with shoes, with like, you know, neutral shoe for supinator or supinator. It's all like kind of, I don't want to say a myth, but like people don't fall into these like really neat categories of like what type of shoe they should wear, or whether they should have something with less of a heel drop or more of a heel drop. It's really all a matter of like, what have you worn before? What are you comfortable with? You know, some people want to work towards, you know, being a more minimalist. I mean, I've seen people run barefoot at events. I've seen people run, you know, ultras in sandals. And I've seen people run with, you know, like the Hoka type shoe, where they've got a lot of cushion going on. You know, personally, I've run the gamut myself, where I was in like a minimal, I was wearing Brooks. They were like a 4 millimeter for a while. They worked for a bit. And then like I developed some injuries, and so I went to a different type of shoe. So it really depends. And so like, you know, having a gait analysis, and also really, really knowing sort of the shoes that you've worn that have worked well for you in the past is also important. So like switching from, you know, what's called a neutral shoe, you know, to, you know, I want to just do barefoot running. Like, it's not like a smart thing to do, because the heel drop is typically around that 10 to 12 millimeters. You know, a more minimal shoe is anywhere between 4 and 8. So you really need to, like, if you've been in something that's got more of a heel drop and you want to go to something less, for whatever your reasons are, you need to do it gradually. So like, do your research, you know, and you also want to make sure that, like, you know, you don't have any injuries to start with, you don't have any nagging pain, your strength is good, your gait form is good. Like, make sure all of those parts of the puzzle are together before you make those changes in your footwear, because you could end up with injuries if you don't, if you're not cautious. That
was like the perfect answer, I feel like, to that question. No, I love that because I do think that it really is kind of whatever works for you. And I feel like that's always been, I've worn so many different running shoes throughout my time running. I have run barefoot sometimes just for fun, you know. So yeah, I mean, there's just, you know, wherever you're at in your running and what's important to you. No, I think that's great. My last question for you, and I feel like I have to have you on again because there's so much more that I would like to talk to you about, but I am running out of time with the baby here and also with the length of time here. But so you've done so many interesting races. It seems like you know, Ironmans, triathlons, all that stuff, with just also marathons. Do you have a favorite race or one that you thought you learned something really valuable in that you could just talk about really quick?
Oh gosh. I mean, I could talk a lot about a lot of them. I'm somebody who, you know, I've run a lot of races with my husband before we got married and then after we got married, and run races with friends before in the past, and they're like, remember that part of the course where blah blah blah, and I'm like, I don't remember the course. Some of the events I do remember, you know, bits and pieces of the course, but I more remember sort of the experience of the event. You know, I would say, you know, probably, you know, there's actually, it's hard for me to pick. There's three events that sort of come to mind when you ask that question. The first one is when I did a 50K trail race. And so that was my longest distance to date at that time. That's actually the longest. Well, I take that back. Is that the longest? No, I run a little bit longer than that. I also did this 7-day crazy ultra marathon that I did like 230 miles in 7 days. So that was probably the craziest thing that I did. But anyway, this 50K trail race that I did, I was part of a trail running club, and they sort of like seduced / conned me into like signing up for an ultra marathon distance. And I was dealing with some knee pain at the time in my training, and that sort of came off and on. And I was determined to do the race. In hindsight, I probably should have not done the race. I probably should have just, you know, taken the time off to heal completely. But it was just one of those things that I was like, I'm not sure if it's going to act up on me or not. And so really what I learned was, you know, pacing myself. It wasn't about the time. It was just about the experience on the trail. And for anybody who's run, you know, road events versus a trail event, they're very, very different. The community is very different. It's more of just like and you'll meet these kind of people too in road events as well, but it's more of just like a laid back, let's just like enjoy the day, enjoy the weather. Like you stop at the aid station, like you chat up the you know, the people who are assisting at the aid station. You actually like stop and fill your water and actually stop and eat, versus like at a road event where it's like, you know, first time runners want to know, like, if I stop at the aid station, take a drink of water, is it still considered, you know, continuous running? And, you know, like at that point, you know, when I had several events already under my belt when I did that 50K, and, you know, it was really just what I learned was just like, you know what, we're all just out here to just enjoy. It's just another run. It's just another training run. It's just yes, it's labeled as an event and there's other people doing it, but really it's just another day. It's just another day out on the trail. It's just another day to like be out and enjoy. You know, I do remember one part of the trail, there's like this apple orchard that we ran through, and I just remember thinking like, oh, this is so, you know, so amazing to just be out here, you know, enjoying the day. So, you know, the lesson there being just like, you know, any run is a training run. There's no such really thing as like a bad run. It's just an experience to learn from. And events are the same too. So like, you know, just go out and like enjoy the experience for what it is, whatever it turns out to be. And, you know, you can set some expectations, but like, don't beat yourself up if you don't meet those expectations. Like, it's okay to come in, you know, towards the end of the pack like somebody needs to. It's okay to come in the middle of the pack. It's okay to slow down and walk if you need to. You know, it's okay to, you know, whatever it is. So like being gentle with yourself and just enjoying the experience. So that would be the first one. My second one was the Ironman that I did. And that was back in 2011, 12, maybe 2012. So it's been a while since I did that one. But I was at a point where I was just like, you know, like what's next? What's next? What's next? Where I started with like my first race was a 10K that I had ever done. Then I did the half marathon. Then I did a marathon, the 50K, and then it was like, okay, so like what's the next thing? And so let me buy a bike and like learn how to swim efficiently. But that event really taught me. You know, the run is at the end, right? So you swim, then you bike, and then you run. And the run ended up being in a like torrential downpour with thunder and lightning. I thought that they were going to cancel the race. And at that point, I was already like 14, 15 hours in. I finished in like it was a little over 16 hours, I think. So definitely like not like top of the class, but like I did it. And I just remember like coming in from the bike ride and just thinking, oh my God, I have to run a full marathon. And I've already biked 112 miles. I've already swam 2.5 miles. And now I have to go and run a marathon. And so one of the like mind tricks that I've used with myself over the years with training when anything becomes difficult is like, you know, just kind of thinking about, let this be, you know, my legs are fresh. This is I'm just starting my run, like not like thinking about sort of blocking out the rest of kind of what I've already done and not playing into, you know, the mind chatter. So learning to, a lot of times when something gets hard, it's, you know, it's not so much the physical piece. I mean, yes, if you did your training properly, it is physical, but a lot of it is the mental piece too. So to like persevere and like finish the thing, like is it taking longer than you anticipated? Yes. Are these like the ideal conditions? No. But am I going to remember this forever? Absolutely. And just resetting your mind of like, I can do this, like finding a mantra. Okay, I just have to run to the next telephone pole. I just have to do one more, out and back, or the promise of like seeing, a loved one or, your coach or your kids or whoever it is at the finish line. Like find those internal motivators, because nobody's going to motivate you from the outside in. It has to come from the inside out. So whatever it is that you're doing, I'm using an extreme example here of an Ironman, but I mean, this can apply to like anything that you do really in life. I mean, is your motivation, right? Is you have to find that internal reason, that internal drive to continue to persevere and to pursue whatever that goal is. So really that was one of my hardest challenges of that event, was just that mind over matter, mind over body, because my body was fatigued, but like if I just gave into like, I'm so tired, I never would have been able to finish. And the last one is less of a success and more of a, my husband and I, we did a marathon together. I can't remember which event it was. But we were both, he had an injury and we started off together. We were going to run the course together. And like the first mile in, I was like, oh man, I can tell with his like breathing pattern, the way he's running, like this is not going to go well at all. And I had been training really hard. I wanted to like meet a certain time goal for myself. And so he was like, you know what, just go ahead. Like I'll be fine. Like no big deal or whatever. And so I went ahead, I ran so many miles. Again, like the detail, I'm telling you, like details of events are like fuzzy for me. Like he could probably tell you this in a lot more detail, but like I went ahead and I ran, I don't even remember how many miles it was, but we weren't together for a period of time. And then I started to fall apart, and I was just like, what am I doing? Like we came to do this event together as a couple. He's back there like with an injury and hurting. Like, what is the point of me like still pushing on? I think I was at like mile 16 or something. And I was like, I still have, 6 plus 4 is, 10 more. I still have 10 more miles. It was like 8 or 10 more miles that I had to still go. And I was like, what is the point of this? Of like, he's back there, like probably hurting. I'm like falling apart over here. Like we may as well just like finish this thing together. So I actually stopped, turned around, ran back to go find him. And so I ended up finding him, and then we finished the thing together. So, again, was it our fastest time? I don't know. I mean, like, people, like, we were like at the way end, and we ended up walking like a good part of it. People were like, "Oh, is this your first marathon?" I'm like, "No, actually, I've done probably like over a dozen at this point." It's just like one of those days, So like a huge learning experience of just like, enjoy the experience for what it was. I wanted to meet a certain time goal that went out the window. Like, who cares? Like, I have this like awesome memory of finishing this race, with my husband. Were we in the boat? Were we in the best condition? No, absolutely not. But like, we look back and we're like, oh my God, like, why did we even, like, how many miles did we walk to like finish that thing? And we ended up running the last mile together. We pushed through and we ran the last mile, and it was amazing. I mean, and this coming from other events that we did, where, he ran like a 3-hour marathon, 3 hours and a little bit of change. And I've done just barely sub 4. I mean, this one was like, are we going to make the time cutoff? I mean, so it was a very different experience for both of us, but one of those ones that will just like forever be, emblazoned in our mind, together as something that we did. Something that we did together. So that was a really special event and a learning experience for us both.
No, I love all of that, because I feel like almost everything you touched on is stuff I try to incorporate into Run Club, of like lessons that go along with running. And, you'd said, I think when you were talking about the Ironman, how like, your mind and all those things, but it applies so much to life outside of running too. So it's just such a universal thing. It's like the things you learn through running, you can apply it to everything. So I think that's so awesome. That is kind of all the time I feel like we have now. You do your gait analysis virtually, is that right? So if anybody wants to get some help with their running form, where can they reach you?
So I'm mostly on Facebook, so you can just find me at Rachel Pope on Facebook. It's actually facebook.com/Rachel Pope 802 if you want to just look it up by the website. I also have a website. It's mostly directed, because this is my side, my personal business. It's mostly directed towards moms, but if you want to kind of learn a little bit about me and sort of where I come from and my own journey and my story a little bit more, you can go to rachelpope.co. So not com, but .co. So you can find me on there. But yeah, I mean, I'm in my inbox on Facebook pretty much every day. So if you're interested in a gait analysis, I do everything virtually. So I would have you like take a video of yourself. We could go over the details of sort of what I'm looking for as far as perspective and how long the video should be. And then I would do the analysis, and then we would meet virtually, like on a Zoom call, and go over those results. So I could give you some pointers on, this is what I'm noticing. Here's where you need to kind of focus your efforts outside of running. So feel free to just send me a message.
Awesome. And I can put both of those things in the show notes so it's easier for people to find. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I feel like everything was so helpful. Hope you all really enjoyed that interview, because I had so much fun talking about all that information. And again, thank you to Rachel for taking the time to talk to us about, all things about kids running, gait analysis, running form, the dangers of specializing in sports too early. So lots of really cool things, and talking about some of her favorite races and things that she's learned from all the cool different runs that she has done. So again, super awesome. So glad we got to talk to her. Hopefully we'll get to talk to her again soon about some other things with this. So this is being recorded on Friday, June 17th in the morning. Just some more topical updates. So if anybody has been following the Run Far Foundation, Greg Nance is running across America for youth mental health. So check him out on his Instagram. It's Greg Runs Far, and also Run Far Foundation on Instagram as well. And I can put that in the show notes today. He is on, I think it's like day 55. He's getting really close to the West Coast. It's been a really cool journey following him. And again, this isn't sponsored or anything, but I have got a chance to talk to them and work with them a little bit on some research for some things. So it's a super cool foundation. Obviously, it's all of what we stand for here at Run Club. So, the running, the mental health, and, also just really cool people who are into running. So that's just really cool. So check out his journey before he is done. Also tonight in Philly, because of course we are close to Philly here, we may see the high school 800 meter record fall. It has been a really cool year in high school running, especially for the boys. The mile record recently was topped, and now I think it's Cade Flat, he is going for the 800 meter record. So by the time this comes out, we will know if that did or did not happen. But at this very moment, I'm super excited to see that, because we gotta love and support our young runners. So also super cool. That's all I got for today. If you have any questions, comments, you have something cool for an interview or article topics or anything like that, please email me at marikeerunclub@gmail.com.